A guard blocked Camilla from entering Diana's dressing room. It's off limits by order of the prince. Camilla had worked at the Royal Theatre for almost 3 years, and in that time she had seen almost everything that went on behind the scenes. From hurried costume changes to last-minute script corrections, she had learned to move quickly and quietly, always aware of the rules that kept the theater running smoothly. She loved the energy of the place, the way everyone worked together like a well-oiled machine. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't quite explain, something that made the usually familiar corridors feel strange and intimidating. She clutched a small stack of scripts in her hands, along with a notebook filled with costume notes and reminders. The pages rattled as she walked briskly, her shoes echoing softly on the polished floors. She had been asked to deliver some updates directly to Diana, the star of the production, who was preparing for an important rehearsal later that afternoon. Normally, this would have been a simple task. She knew Diana well enough to hand her notes and return to her own duties without any fuss. But today, something in the air suggested that even simple tasks could become complicated. Camilla approached the corridor leading to the dressing rooms, her steps careful but determined. The Royal Theatre was filled with rules, some written and some unwritten. Everyone knew that certain doors were off-limits, that some areas were strictly for actors, designers, or special staff. Camilla had always respected those boundaries. She prided herself on understanding the delicate balance of access and discretion that life behind the scenes demanded. But even with her experience, she felt a flicker of anxiety as she neared Diana's room. When she reached the entrance, she froze. A tall guard stood directly in front of the door, his posture rigid and formal. He wore the standard uniform, crisp and dark, with polished shoes that gleamed under the theater lights. His eyes were sharp, scanning the corridor as though he expected trouble at any moment. For a split second, Camilla thought she might have been mistaken. Perhaps she had the wrong door. But the small brass nameplate confirmed it, Diana dressing room. Her heart skipped a beat. The guard's voice broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone firm but polite. "This area is off-limits, by order of the prince." Camilla blinked. She had never heard such a direct statement before, the prince. She had always known that members of the royal family had influence over certain events at the theater, but to personally restrict access to an actor's dressing room was unusual, to say the least. She felt a mixture of curiosity and frustration rise in her chest. What could possibly be happening inside that required such strict control? "I just have some notes for Diana," Camilla said, trying to keep her voice calm. "It won't take a minute. Please, I need to make sure she has the latest updates before rehearsal." The guard shook his head slowly, his expression unmoving. "I understand your position, but the rule comes from the highest level. I cannot allow anyone to enter." Camilla felt her stomach tighten. She had always been confident in her ability to navigate the theater's many rules, but this was different. This was not a matter of misplaced keys or minor misunderstandings. This was a command from the prince himself, and there was no room for negotiation. She could feel the heat rising in her face, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She had never felt so powerless in her job before. Stepping back slightly, Camilla tried to think. Maybe there was another way to deliver the notes without entering the room. Perhaps she could leave them with the guard or send a message through another assistant. But even as she considered these options, she realized that the timing was crucial. Diana's rehearsal would start soon, and if she didn't get the notes to her in time, it could disrupt the performance. Camilla's mind raced with possible solutions, each one more complicated than the last. As she stood there, she became aware of the other staff moving around the corridor. Costume designers carried racks of clothes, assistants hurried past with scripts and props, and stagehands wheeled equipment toward the rehearsal area. Everyone seemed focused on their tasks, oblivious to the tension she felt. Camilla envied their simplicity. For them, the rules were clear and their responsibilities well-defined. For her, it felt like she was standing at the edge of a delicate line, unsure of whether stepping forward would be harmless or disastrous. Her gaze returned to the guard. He had not moved, not even an inch. His eyes were steady, but there was a faint flicker of curiosity there, as though he, too, wondered why someone would be so determined to enter this particular room. Camilla took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She reminded herself that she had faced challenges before, that she had navigated complex situations without panicking. This was simply another test of patience and tact. Just as she was about to speak again, a faint noise came from inside the dressing room. The sound of Diana's voice reached her ears, soft but unmistakable. She was speaking on the phone, and her tone carried a mix of concentration and tension. Camilla's heart quickened. Whatever was happening inside, it was important. She had always admired Diana, not just for her talent, but for her professionalism and dedication. And now, for the first time, she felt like she was witnessing a side of Diana that few others ever saw. Camilla stepped back, trying to respect the boundary while still listening. The voice on the other end of the phone spoke quickly, and Diana responded with careful, deliberate words. Camilla couldn't hear everything, but the urgency was clear. Something significant was taking place, something that required complete privacy. She felt a pang of empathy. She understood what it meant to carry responsibility and pressure, even if it was in a different form. For several minutes, she stood there quietly, weighing her options. She could leave the notes and retreat, or she could wait, hoping for an opportunity to hand them over directly. Each choice carried its own risks and rewards. Camilla realized that she was not just dealing with a physical barrier, but with a situation that demanded patience, discretion, and respect for authority. It was a moment that tested more than her skills as an assistant. It tested her judgment and character. Finally, she decided to wait. She would remain nearby, observing and listening, but without overstepping her role. Camilla knew that sometimes the most difficult challenges required restraint. She found a quiet corner in the corridor, out of sight of the guard, and settled there. She reviewed her notes, making small adjustments and additions as she watched the movements of the other staff. Her hands shook slightly, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation, but she forced herself to focus. As the minutes passed, Camilla began to notice patterns in the activity around the dressing room. Stagehands came and went with props, assistants whispered to each other about costume adjustments, and the guard remained a constant presence, vigilant and alert. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, and Camilla realized that she was part of a larger system, one that required coordination and respect. She felt both small and significant at the same time, aware of her limitations but also of her responsibility. By the time Diana finished her phone call, Camilla had developed a deeper understanding of the delicate balance that governed the theater. She had learned that rules were not always arbitrary, that authority often had reasons hidden from plain view. And most importantly, she had begun to understand that sometimes the most important work happened behind closed doors, away from prying eyes and impatient hands. When Diana finally emerged, even briefly, to speak with a trusted assistant, Camilla watched quietly, making mental notes and preparing for the right moment. She realized that her patience and respect for boundaries would be just as valuable as her skills and knowledge. And though the moment felt small, it marked the beginning of a new awareness, a lesson in discretion, empathy, and professionalism that she would carry with her throughout her career. After waiting for a while in the quiet corner of the corridor, Camilla finally allowed herself to breathe a little more easily. She could see the tension in the air slowly fade as the other staff moved about their tasks, focused on preparing the stage, props, and costumes. Yet the mystery of Diana's dressing room lingered in Camilla's mind. The prince's name had been invoked, and that alone made the situation feel far more important than anything she had dealt with before. She had always known that the theater had rules, but the thought that a royal figure was involved added a weight that was impossible to ignore. Camilla decided to focus on her work while she waited. She double-checked the costume notes she had brought, making minor corrections and ensuring every detail was clear. She wanted to be ready the moment she could finally deliver them. But even as she reviewed her notes, her thoughts kept drifting back to the closed door and the stern guard. Why was this particular room under such strict orders? What could Diana possibly be doing that required the prince's direct involvement? The questions circled in her mind endlessly, feeding a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. As she walked back toward the costume racks, Camilla overheard a conversation between two assistants. They were speaking in hushed voices, their heads closed together so no one else could hear. "Did you hear? The prince is personally checking on Diana's rehearsal today," one whispered. "No wonder the guard is so strict. I've never seen him act like that before," the other replied. Camilla's ears perked up. The prince himself? That explained the unusual tension and the strict order to keep people out. She felt a shiver of both excitement and worry. She had always admired Diana's talent, but now she understood that there were pressures on her that few people even knew about. It was not just a rehearsal. It was an event under intense scrutiny. Every movement, every line, every costume detail mattered in ways Camilla had never considered. She tried to focus on her own responsibilities, but her mind kept returning to the closed door. Every few minutes, she found herself glancing toward it, imagining what might be happening inside. The voice she had overheard earlier still echoed faintly in her memory, the mix of concentration and tension giving her a sense that something important was underway. Camilla realized that the private moments of performers were often more intense than the public performances themselves. Later, while helping another assistant with costume adjustments, Camilla overheard more rumors. They spoke of a special project Diana was preparing, something that had to remain confidential until the very last moment. Camilla's curiosity grew, but she also began to understand that there were boundaries she could not cross. The other assistants, though they whispered and speculated, had learned over time that some doors were off-limits for good reasons. Breaking those boundaries could create problems that extended far beyond the theater. Camilla's feelings were conflicted. On one hand, she wanted to help Diana in any way she could. She carried the notes carefully, ready to give them directly to her. On the other hand, she understood the importance of rules and discretion. Every instinct in her told her to be patient, to wait for the right opportunity. Yet human curiosity is a powerful thing, and she found it difficult to resist the urge to know what was happening inside the forbidden room. Time seemed to stretch as Camilla moved quietly through the corridor, keeping herself busy while observing the guard. The man remained vigilant, never leaving his post, his eyes scanning the hallway constantly. It was clear to Camilla that he understood his role completely. He was not just enforcing a rule. He was protecting someone from disruption and ensuring that the order from the prince was respected. In that moment, she realized how important such guards were, not just as enforcers, but as silent guardians of the performers' focus and privacy. Her attention returned to Diana. Camilla had always admired her not only for her skill, but also for her discipline and professionalism. Watching the preparation from a distance, Camilla began to appreciate the level of dedication required to perform under such strict conditions. The pressure of the prince's scrutiny, combined with the expectations of the theater, created a situation where even the smallest mistake could have serious consequences. Camilla felt a deep sense of respect for Diana, realizing that talent alone was not enough. Discipline, patience, and resilience were equally important. As the minutes passed, Camilla noticed subtle signs that something unusual was happening. The assistants moved with extra care, speaking softly and glancing toward the dressing room frequently. Even the stagehands, who usually worked with confidence and ease, seemed more cautious. Camilla felt a growing sense of anticipation. Whatever was happening inside the room was significant, and the theater had shifted into a different rhythm, one where every movement had meaning. Camilla's thoughts wandered to her own role in the theater. She had always taken pride in her responsibilities, believing that every small task contributed to the success of the performance. Now, however, she realized that some contributions could only be made indirectly. By respecting boundaries, being patient, and observing quietly, she was supporting the performance in ways that might not be immediately visible. The lesson was subtle but powerful. Sometimes, helping meant stepping back, waiting, and allowing others to focus. Despite her resolve, the urge to approach the door never completely left her. Camilla found herself imagining what she would say if the guard allowed her in, how she would hand over the notes, and what Diana might say in response. The scenarios played out in her mind endlessly, a mixture of hope, anxiety, and excitement. She understood that these thoughts were natural, but she also knew she had to remain careful. Any wrong move could damage her professional reputation and create unnecessary tension in an already sensitive environment. At one point, Camilla decided to step away from the corridor for a moment to deliver some additional costume notes to another assistant. Even as she moved through the theater, her eyes kept returning to the closed door. Every detail, the polished floor, the gentle hum of activity, the steady presence of the guard, reminded her that the situation was delicate. She felt a growing awareness of the responsibilities that came with working in such a high-pressure environment. While assisting with the costumes, Camilla noticed that Diana's preparations were unusually meticulous. She observed the way the assistants adjusted the fabrics, the care with which props were placed, and the quiet intensity of their movements. Even without entering the room, Camilla could sense the effort and focus required to meet the prince's expectations. It was clear that the secrecy and the strict rules were designed to protect not just Diana, but the integrity of the entire production. As the rehearsal time approached, Camilla felt a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. She had spent hours observing, waiting, and learning, yet she had still not delivered the notes directly. The importance of timing and patience became increasingly clear. She realized that her own curiosity had to be balanced with the needs of the performance. It was not enough to act on impulse. She had to respect the order and understand the larger context. Finally, a small shift in the hallway caught Camilla's attention. The guard, who had remained steadfast for hours, seemed to relax slightly. A trusted assistant briefly entered the room and emerged shortly after, carrying a few items carefully. Camilla watched closely, noting the efficiency and precision with which the tasks were handled. It was a glimpse into a world she had never fully understood, a world where every action mattered, and where patience and discretion were as important as skill and knowledge. By the end of the afternoon, Camilla felt a deeper appreciation for the complexities of her work environment. She had learned that the prince's orders were not arbitrary, that the guard's vigilance was not intimidating but protective, and that her own role, while limited, was still valuable. She understood that every rule, every boundary, and every act of discretion had a purpose, and that respecting these limits was a sign of professionalism and maturity. Camilla left the corridor that day with a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had not entered the forbidden room, but she had gained something far more important: understanding, awareness, and a new perspective on her responsibilities. She knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her, guiding her actions and decisions in the days to come. As she walked away, she glanced one last time at the closed door. The mystery inside remained, but it was no longer a source of frustration or impatience. Instead, it represented the boundaries and responsibilities that made the theater and its performers so remarkable. Camilla understood that her curiosity, though strong, had to be balanced with respect, patience, and careful judgment. And with that understanding, she felt ready to continue her work, confident in her role and respectful of the world behind the closed door. Days passed since Camilla had first been blocked from entering Diana's dressing room. The memory of the tall, stern guard and the mysterious order from the prince lingered in her mind, nagging her curiosity like a quiet, persistent whisper. Every time she walked past the corridor, her gaze drifted toward the polished door, imagining what was happening behind it. She knew she shouldn't, yet the temptation to know more was growing stronger by the day. The theater had rules, yes, but her human instinct to uncover the unknown kept tugging at her thoughts. Camilla had spent hours reflecting on the lessons she had learned during her initial wait, lessons about patience, discretion, and respect for boundaries. But she realized that these lessons were being tested now. She was caught in a tug-of-war between her professionalism and her curiosity. On the one hand, she knew she had to respect the prince's orders and the guard's authority. On the other hand, she wanted to help Diana in any way possible. What if her notes or assistance were needed urgently? What if a small act of support could make a difference for someone she admired so much? Her feelings were conflicted. She found herself lingering near the corridor more often, under the pretext of other tasks. Sometimes she carried props, sometimes costume adjustments, always hoping for a moment when the guard might be distracted. She told herself that it was only to ensure everything ran smoothly, but deep down, she admitted that the curiosity was her real motivation. Every day she played a careful game, observing from a distance, listening for sounds behind the door, watching the way the assistants and stagehands moved. It was like trying to solve a puzzle without the final piece. One afternoon, while arranging scripts in a nearby room, Camilla noticed the guard's attention falter for just a second. A senior assistant had come to deliver something urgently, and the guard had momentarily turned to acknowledge them. It was the smallest opening, but to Camilla, it felt like a crack in the wall she had been facing for days. Her heart began to race. She knew she had to be careful. One wrong move, one misstep, and she could not only jeopardize her job but also disrupt Diana's preparations. Camilla approached the doorway slowly, her steps silent against the polished floor. Her palms were slightly sweaty, and she felt the familiar thrill of doing something forbidden, tempered by the awareness of the risks. She reached the edge of the threshold and paused. Just standing there, she could hear faint noises, the rustle of fabric, the soft murmur of voices, and the occasional sharp command from someone inside. It was enough to confirm that important work was happening, but not enough to satisfy her curiosity completely. She considered turning back. She really should. She had already learned that boundaries existed for a reason. But the temptation was overwhelming. What could be the harm in just a brief glance? A small peek, nothing more, she told herself. But even as she reasoned this way, a part of her knew that this could lead to trouble. She could see the caution in the guard's posture, the strict order from the prince, and she realized that discretion had its own value. Still, the human mind has a way of justifying small rebellions. Camilla's thoughts raced with possibilities. Perhaps she could quickly hand over the notes and leave. Perhaps she could just observe silently and step back. Perhaps Diana would even thank her for her effort. Each thought strengthened the pull toward the forbidden, making it harder to resist. The more she thought about it, the more the boundary seemed less like a rule and more like a challenge. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Camilla reminded herself of everything she had learned so far. She had seen the careful preparation, the dedication, and the intense focus required for the performance. She had witnessed the quiet professionalism of the assistants and the protective vigilance of the guard. All of it was part of a delicate balance, a system that worked because everyone respected their roles and boundaries. Disrupting it, even for a small reason, could have consequences she could not foresee. Yet the temptation remained. She could not shake the image of Diana, working tirelessly behind the closed door, perhaps needing help that only she could provide. Camilla's empathy battled with her rational side. She wanted to be helpful, to do something meaningful, but she also knew that her desire to act must be tempered by patience and respect. It was a struggle between her heart and her mind, one that made her feel restless and uneasy. Over the next few hours, Camilla found herself standing near the doorway more than once, watching for any sign of movement. She listened carefully for sounds from inside, for voices she might recognize, for any hint of what Diana was doing. The theater had grown quiet as the rehearsal approached, and the small noises from the dressing room seemed louder, sharper, and more mysterious. Camilla felt as if she were peering into another world, one filled with pressure, talent, and responsibility. The guard remained alert, and Camilla admired his dedication. He was not simply enforcing a rule. He was safeguarding the space for Diana, ensuring that nothing disrupted her focus. The more she watched, the more she realized that boundaries could protect people just as much as they could restrict them. The prince's orders, strict as they were designed to shield Diana from distractions and unnecessary stress. Camilla felt a mix of admiration and guilt. She admired the effort it took to maintain such order, but she also felt guilty for being tempted to break it. That evening, Camilla faced a quiet moment of reflection. Sitting in her small office, she reviewed her notes once again, thinking about what she had learned over the past days. She realized that her own curiosity and desire to help could sometimes clash with rules and responsibilities. But she also understood that there were ways to contribute meaningfully without overstepping boundaries. Small acts of preparation, careful observation, and patience could be just as valuable as direct involvement. Yet, the temptation was not gone. Camilla found herself imagining scenarios in which she could briefly enter the dressing room. She pictured handing over the notes quickly, seeing Diana's grateful smile, and returning to her duties unnoticed. Each mental image made her heart race, but it also reminded her of the risks. She could be caught, reprimanded, or worse, she could disrupt the delicate balance of the rehearsal. The theater, she realized, was a place where every action had consequences, and even small decisions mattered. The next day, Camilla arrived early, carrying additional notes and costume adjustments for Diana. The corridor was quiet, the early morning light casting soft shadows on the polished floor. She approached the door with a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. The guard stood as he always did, vigilant and composed. Camilla nodded politely, placing her notes carefully on a small tray that the guard offered, and stepped back. She reminded herself that patience was also a form of help. By respecting the rules, she was supporting Diana and the performance in a way that was not immediately visible, but equally important. As she retreated to a nearby corner, Camilla noticed the rhythm of the theater once again. The quiet hum of preparation, the careful movements of assistants, and the soft steps of performers as they readied themselves. She realized that the temptation she had felt was not simply about curiosity. It was about wanting to be involved in something meaningful, to contribute in a moment of pressure. The lesson was clear. Contribution did not always mean direct action. Sometimes it meant patience, discretion, and silent support. By the end of the day, Camilla felt a renewed sense of understanding. She had confronted her temptation, observed her emotions, and made a conscious choice to respect the boundaries in place. It was not easy, and the curiosity remained, but she had learned the value of self-control and the importance of timing. She understood that the theater, the performers, and even the prince's orders were part of a complex system that required trust, patience, and respect. Camilla's admiration for Diana grew stronger. She recognized the enormous pressure that came with being the focus of such attention, and she realized that the rules were designed not to restrict, but to protect. Camilla had learned that sometimes the most important support was quiet, respectful, and indirect. She felt proud of herself for resisting the temptation to act impulsively, knowing that her patience was contributing to the success of the performance in ways she might never see. By the time the rehearsal began, Camilla had fully embraced her role. She moved through the theater with a sense of purpose and calm, her thoughts no longer dominated by the closed door. She understood that her temptation had been a test, one that taught her patience, empathy, and the value of silent contribution. She knew that her role, while behind the scenes, was crucial, and that her respect for rules and boundaries allowed the performers, the assistants, and the entire theater to function smoothly. And though the temptation to know more, to peek behind the door, never fully disappeared, Camilla had discovered that true professionalism often meant waiting, observing, and trusting that every part of the system had its purpose. She had grown in understanding and in skill, ready to face future challenges with patience, discretion, and a deeper awareness of the delicate balance that made the theater and its performers so remarkable. The next morning, Camilla arrived at the theater feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. The events of the past days had left her restless with curiosity, yet she also felt a quiet sense of responsibility. She had resisted the temptation to enter Diana's dressing room, observed from a distance, and respected the guard's authority. But today felt different. Something in the atmosphere hinted that the day's rehearsal would be significant, perhaps more so than any other day she had experienced at the theater. As she approached the corridor, she noticed the guard standing in his usual spot. He looked the same as always, tall, alert, and immovable, but Camilla sensed a subtle difference. There was a faint tension in his posture, as if he knew that something important was about to happen. She clenched her notes in her hand, reminding herself to stay calm, patient, and professional. Every instinct in her told her to respect the rules, but a small part of her hoped for a moment when she might finally be allowed inside. She moved quietly to a nearby corner, pretending to check costume racks while her eyes kept flicking toward the door. The theater was unusually still that morning. The staff moved with extra care, speaking in hushed tones, and the usual chatter of preparation had been replaced by a focused silence. Camilla realized that the entire space was charged with anticipation. Whatever was happening inside Diana's dressing room was clearly important, and it was demanding the full attention of everyone involved. As she waited, Camilla noticed the senior assistant approaching the guard. They spoke in low voices, glancing toward the door and then back at each other. Camilla could not hear the exact words, but the gestures and expressions suggested that a decision was being made. Her heart began to race. Was this her chance to finally deliver the notes? Or would she simply remain outside, observing once again? Moments later, the guard stepped aside slightly, allowing the assistant to enter briefly with a small package. Camilla watched carefully, noting every movement, every glance, and every step. The package was handled with extreme care, as though it contained something fragile or confidential. Camilla realized that she was witnessing a rare glimpse into the delicate balance of the theater, where timing, precision, and discretion mattered more than speed or efficiency. Despite the intense curiosity she felt, Camilla reminded herself to be patient. She had learned over the past days that her role was not just about completing tasks, but about supporting the performers in ways that might not be immediately visible. By respecting boundaries, she was contributing to the success of the rehearsal, even without direct involvement. Yet the desire to help directly, to finally hand over her notes and speak to Diana, was growing stronger. As the morning progressed, Camilla noticed another shift. Diana herself appeared at the doorway, briefly emerging to greet a few assistants and check the arrangement of costumes. Her face showed a mixture of concentration and fatigue, but there was also a quiet determination in her eyes. Camilla felt a surge of empathy. She could see the pressure that Diana was under, and she realized that the boundaries set by the prince and enforced by the guard were not arbitrary, they were protective. The moment felt fleeting, but it was enough for Camilla to understand the importance of discretion. Diana's presence reminded her that professionalism often required patience, observation, and silent support. She adjusted her posture, making sure she remained out of sight, and quietly continued her work with the costume racks. The realization that her indirect contribution could be just as valuable as direct action gave her a sense of calm and purpose. Hours passed, and the rehearsal preparations grew more intense. Camilla observed the meticulous care with which every detail was handled. The assistants adjusted fabrics with precision, props were placed exactly where they needed to be, and the performers moved with quiet focus. Even the guard's vigilance seemed to intensify, as though he understood the importance of maintaining the boundary and ensuring that nothing disrupted Diana's preparation. Camilla felt a deep admiration for everyone involved. Finally, a moment came when the guard approached her. His voice was calm, yet carried a hint of authority. "Camilla, the assistant has finished delivering the last items," he said. "Diana is ready for the rehearsal. You may enter briefly to hand her your notes, but you must be quick and leave immediately." Camilla's heart leapt. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She nodded quickly, clutching her notes and following the guard toward the door. Every step felt significant, as though she were crossing from the world of observation into the world of action. She reminded herself to remain composed, to focus on her task, and to respect the space she was entering. The moment she stepped inside, she felt a wave of tension mixed with awe. The room was organized with meticulous care. Costumes hung neatly on racks, scripts were arranged in order, and props were placed with precision. Diana was there, reviewing her lines and checking the arrangement of items on her dressing table. Her concentration was intense, but when she looked up and saw Camilla, a faint smile appeared on her face. "Camilla," Diana said softly, her voice calm but appreciative. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I just wanted to make sure you had the updated notes before rehearsal," Camilla replied, handing over the papers. "I know it's been a busy week and I wanted to help." Diana accepted the notes with a nod, quickly scanning through them. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate your attention to detail. Every little bit helps, especially today." Camilla noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The tension she had felt from outside was still present, but now it carried a sense of purpose and focus. She realized that the prince's orders, the guard's vigilance, and the strict boundaries were all part of a system designed to protect Diana and ensure that the rehearsal went smoothly. Her respect for the rules had allowed her to contribute meaningfully without disrupting the process. As Diana returned to her preparations, Camilla stepped back, careful not to linger. The room was charged with concentration, and she understood that even small distractions could have consequences. Yet, in that brief moment, she felt a sense of connection and understanding. She had seen firsthand the pressures Diana faced, and she had participated, in a small but significant way, in supporting her success. After leaving the dressing room, Camilla reflected on the experience. She realized that boundaries and rules, even when frustrating or mysterious, often existed to protect those who were working under pressure. The prince's order, once a source of curiosity and temptation, now made perfect sense. It was not about control or restriction. It was about ensuring that Diana could perform at her best without unnecessary stress or distraction. Camilla also recognized the importance of timing and discretion. Her patience, observation, and respect for authority had allowed her to contribute at the right moment, in the right way. She understood that true support often required self-control and awareness of the larger system in which she operated. The lesson was powerful. Help does not always come through direct action. Sometimes it comes through careful preparation, observation, and readiness to act when appropriate. By the end of the day, Camilla felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had faced her temptation, observed her emotions, and acted at the right moment. She had learned about patience, empathy, and the value of silent support, and she had gained a new understanding of the delicate balance required in high-pressure environments. She knew that her experience would guide her in future situations, helping her navigate challenges with confidence, respect, and professionalism. As she walked through the theater, she glanced one last time at Diana's dressing room. The door, once a symbol of mystery and restriction, now represented understanding, trust, and the careful orchestration of a complex system. Camilla realized that she had grown, not just as an assistant, but as a person who could balance curiosity with respect, desire to help with patience, and empathy with discretion. The experience left her with a quiet confidence. She knew that she had contributed to something important, even if her role was behind the scenes. She had learned that rules and boundaries were not obstacles, but tools that helped people perform at their best. And she had discovered that acting at the right moment, with understanding and respect, was more powerful than acting impulsively. For Camilla, the day marked a turning point. She had faced temptation, understood the pressures behind the scenes, and acted with discretion. She had seen the care, dedication, and focus required to maintain the delicate balance of the theater, and she had contributed in a meaningful way without overstepping boundaries. The lesson would stay with her forever. True professionalism, empathy, and support often come from understanding, patience, and quiet action. The theater had quieted down after the rehearsal, leaving only a few staff members moving slowly as they tidied up costumes, props, and scripts. Camilla walked through the corridors with a calm, steady pace. The events of the past few days had left a lasting impression on her. She felt a mix of relief, satisfaction, and pride. She had finally understood the balance of patience, discretion, and responsibility that made the theater run smoothly, and she had contributed in her own quiet way. Camilla glanced once more toward Diana's dressing room. The door, which had seemed so mysterious and off-limits before, now felt almost familiar. She remembered the tension of the first day, the strict guard, and the weight of the prince's order. What had once seemed like a barrier now felt like a protective boundary, designed to allow Diana to work in peace. Camilla realized that her respect for this boundary had allowed her to act at the right moment, without disrupting the delicate flow of the rehearsal. As she moved toward the costume area, Camilla reflected on the lessons she had learned. She had always believed that being a good assistant meant doing tasks quickly and efficiently. Now she understood that it also meant observing carefully, being patient, and recognizing when her involvement was most needed. She realized that true support often came from knowing when to step back as much as from knowing when to step forward. Later, she found herself assisting the stagehands in organizing props for the next rehearsal. She moved quietly, focused on the task at hand, yet her mind kept returning to Diana. She remembered the star's expression when she had handed over the notes, the brief but meaningful nod of thanks, and the way Diana had returned to her work with renewed focus. It was a small moment, but it carried a great significance. Camilla realized that even behind-the-scenes actions, done correctly and at the right time, could have a powerful impact. Camilla's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the senior assistant approaching. "Camilla, Diana asked me to thank you personally," the assistant said, smiling. "She appreciates your careful attention to the notes and your patience. You've helped more than you realize." A warm sense of pride filled Camilla. She had not expected recognition, nor had she sought it. Her satisfaction came from knowing that she had done the right thing, even when it was difficult. The acknowledgement from Diana, though brief, reinforced the importance of patience, respect, and timing. It reminded Camilla that her role, though often unseen, mattered deeply to the success of the performance. That evening, as the theater emptied and the lights dimmed, Camilla found a quiet corner to sit and reflect. She thought about the temptation she had faced, the curiosity that had driven her, and the choice she had made to act only when appropriate. She realized that the struggle had been valuable. It had tested her professionalism, her patience, and her empathy. It had shown her the importance of understanding the pressures that performers faced and how her actions could either support or disrupt their work. Camilla's mind wandered to the guard who had initially blocked her entry. She felt a sense of gratitude toward him. His vigilance had not been an obstacle but a form of protection, for Diana, for the rehearsal, and even for Camilla herself. Without his careful watch, she might have acted impulsively and caused unnecessary complications. She realized that authority, when exercised with care and purpose, could guide, protect, and maintain balance. As she continued reflecting, Camilla considered the prince's role in all of this. His order had seemed strict, even intimidating at first. Yet she now understood the intention behind it. It was not to control or restrict, but to ensure that Diana had the focus and privacy she needed to perform at her best. The realization deepened Camilla's appreciation for the systems in place and for the thoughtfulness that often went unseen behind the scenes. Camilla also thought about the performers and staff around her. Each person, whether on stage or behind the scenes, contributed to the success of the theater. The quiet diligence of the assistants, the precision of the stagehands, and the focused effort of Diana all worked together like a perfectly coordinated team. Camilla realized that her patience, observation, and careful timing had allowed her to become a meaningful part of that team, even without direct visibility. The following day, the atmosphere in the theater was lighter but still professional. Camilla noticed Diana walking confidently toward her dressing room, carrying herself with poise and calm determination. She was no longer just the star of the rehearsal. She was someone Camilla deeply respected for her discipline, talent, and resilience. Camilla felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that every small action she took, from arranging costumes to delivering notes with care, contributed to Diana's ability to perform at her best. Later in the day, Camilla had a brief moment alone with Diana. The star smiled warmly, holding out a hand to Camilla. "I want to thank you properly," she said. "Your patience, your attention to detail, and your respect for the rules made a difference today. It's not just the notes, you helped create the space for me to focus." Camilla felt a rush of happiness and pride. She had not sought recognition, yet this acknowledgement affirmed everything she had learned. She realized that support was more than completing tasks. It was about understanding the bigger picture, respecting boundaries, and acting at the right moment. The experience had taught her not only about her role in the theater, but also about life itself, the importance of patience, empathy, and discretion. In the days that followed, Camilla approached her work with a renewed sense of confidence. She moved through the theater with a clear understanding of her responsibilities and a deeper awareness of the pressures on others. She respected boundaries without resentment, observed carefully without judgment, and acted with timing and purpose. Every task, no matter how small, felt meaningful. She had discovered that even quiet, behind-the-scenes actions could have a profound impact. One afternoon, as she organized the props for another rehearsal, Camilla paused to look toward Diana's dressing room. The door, once a symbol of mystery and temptation, now represented understanding, trust, and respect. Camilla smiled quietly to herself. She had grown through the experience. Her patience had been tested, her curiosity had been guided, and her sense of responsibility had deepened. She knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her for the rest of her career. Camilla also reflected on the idea of trust. By respecting the guard, the prince's order, and the boundaries of the theater, she had gained trust, from Diana, from the senior assistants, and even from herself. She realized that trust was fragile but powerful. Acting too quickly or without consideration could have damaged it, while careful, thoughtful action could strengthen it. The awareness of this dynamic made her more confident in her decisions and more attentive to her surroundings. As the theater day ended and Camilla prepared to leave, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced her temptation, understood the pressures and rules behind the scenes, and acted with discretion and patience. She had contributed in a meaningful way, and she had learned lessons about empathy, professionalism, and support that extended far beyond the theater. The experience had changed her, making her more thoughtful, more patient, and more aware of the impact of her actions. Walking home that evening, Camilla reflected on everything that had happened. The days of waiting outside the dressing room, observing the guard, and respecting boundaries now felt like a journey of growth. She had learned that real help sometimes required restraint, that curiosity needed to be balanced with respect, and that patience could be as valuable as action. These lessons were not just about work. They were about life, relationships, and understanding the responsibilities we have to others. As she reached her small apartment, Camilla felt a deep sense of calm. The story of the prince's order, the stern guard, and the closed dressing room would remain with her. But it was no longer a source of frustration or temptation. Instead, it was a story of growth, understanding, and meaningful contribution. She realized that every rule, every boundary, and every act of patience had a purpose, and that respecting them allowed her to be part of something greater than herself. Camilla knew that she would carry these lessons forward in her work at the theater and in her life. She had discovered the value of quiet support, the importance of timing, and the power of discretion. She had learned that patience could create opportunities, empathy could guide actions, and respect for boundaries could lead to deeper understanding and trust. The experience had transformed her perspective, giving her confidence, clarity, and a sense of purpose. Finally, as she prepared for bed that night, Camilla thought once more of Diana, the guard, and the prince's orders. She felt gratitude for the lessons learned, for the chance to contribute meaningfully, and for the understanding that true support often came from patience and respect. She smiled softly, knowing that she had grown, not just as an assistant, but as a thoughtful, responsible, and empathetic person. The theater, with all its rules, boundaries, and hidden pressures, had taught her one of life's most valuable lessons. That sometimes, the greatest help comes not from rushing forward, but from waiting, observing, and acting with care. Camilla drifted to sleep that night with a sense of quiet fulfillment, knowing that she had faced her challenges, respected her boundaries, and contributed to something greater than herself. The journey had been difficult, tempting, and full of uncertainty, but it had ended with understanding, growth, and the satisfaction of knowing that she had done the right thing. And in that knowledge, she found peace, purpose, and the confidence to face whatever challenges might come next.